You are now listening to Part 8 of our 8-part series, Colds and Flus, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I hope you had a delightful week. By now, there should be some, if not crocuses, snowdrops blooming, and we're moving right along here. Should be heading into the equinox, if not already past it here. So enjoy the returning of the green. Remember that green blessings are everywhere. We've been spending the past couple of months, the lean months, the starvation months, talking about colds and flus, talking about antiviral and antibacterial herbs, and getting a sense of both what we have to do to make ourselves sturdier and how we can help ourselves if we should get sick. Remembering that there's no onus about being sick over and over and over again, or getting a cold or the flu and having it turn into a very severe bacterial infection. That's not what we want to have at all, and that's why we have lots of herbal allies to help us. You'll also recall that in my Big Green book, Healing Wise, I talk about the 3 traditions of healing. And let's stop for a moment and look at these 3 traditions, because I think that they will help us as we consolidate everything that we've learned about colds and flus. The scientific tradition measures and fixes. So the scientific tradition can tell us what flu strains were most active last year, and the scientific tradition can reproduce those flu strains and put them into a shot. The problem, shall we say, is that flu strains are always changing. And so the flu strains, the flu viruses that were prevalent last year may not be the ones that are going to be prevalent this year. So when we get a flu shot, in a way it is helpful, but in a way it's not as helpful as we would want it to be. And this is partly because the scientific tradition can only fix. It lacks a true way to prevent. So we think of that flu shot as being preventative, and in the best of all worlds, it would be, because it would teach the immune system how to deal with those flu viruses, and it does teach the immune system how to deal with those flu viruses, but the immune system may not need to have that information. It's rather like someone tutoring you in Chinese the evening before your Spanish exam. Good information, but did you really need it? So scientific tradition gives us ways to fix what's going on. If we have a cold, then we take an antihistamine. We just shut off the histamine response. That's what science does. It says this is being caused by a histamine response that was caused by the cold or the flu virus, and here's an antihistamine, and it will dry you up and shut this down. Unfortunately, what the herbalists and many alternative practitioners think is that doing that actually allows the infection to go deeper into the body's tissues, because we're not really addressing it specifically. In the same way, drugs or herbs like wild cherry that actually sedate the nerve that causes coughing may, in the long run, not be as healthy as things like honey or pine that are antibacterial and that actually go to work in the tissues of the throat and the lungs to directly feel and clear what is going on there. So the scientific tradition is a tradition that we're very familiar with. It measures, and from measuring it is able to replicate, it is able to create, and it is able to fix. Fixity, however, is not a definition of health. As a matter of fact, flexibility is a definition of health. The fixity can lead to poor health. The second tradition is the heroic tradition. The heroic tradition gets its start back several thousand years ago with the humoral theory. The humoral theory was prevalent in ancient Greece, and we see some evidence of it from Egypt as well. And in the humoral theory, there are 4 humors that course through the body. And disease is caused because these 4 humors are disturbed. There is too much or too little of the 4 humors, and we must use various things to change the humors. Now, partly because we didn't have drugs at our disposal, we tended toward using plants that were more and more drug-like in dealing with the humors. We tended to do more and more, shall we call it, warlike things against the body because we were out to get these humors. So we would poke and puke and purge. And the poking is bloodletting. As a matter of fact, you can see poke and puke and purge on a barber pole. That's what the 3 colors of the barber pole mean, that you can get poked or puked or purged here. And that was considered to be good healing practice. So, poking, bleeding, purging, using laxatives and puking, of course, we all know what that is. So the herbs that are still used in the practice of someone who's been trained in the heroic tradition tend to be herbs that look like and act like drugs. And these herbs are frequently powdered and encapsulated so that they have the look and feel of a pill. And they are also herbs that poke and puke and purge. That they go in and they stir things up in the body. As we have been learning and understanding in our 2 months of focusing on colds and flus the wise woman way, the immune system needs help when we're sick. It does not need to be battered. I have noticed that there seems to be a tendency among us human beings that when we do something that we're unhappy with, we tend to make things worse by battering. So let's see what that would look like in the heroic tradition. And there are 3 herbs that are used over and over again in the heroic tradition. I call them the big 3 of the heroic tradition. That is Lobelia inflata, Hydrastis canadensis, and Capsicum annua. And that is Indian tobacco, also known as lobelia or pukeweed, golden seal, and cayenne pepper. Certainly a poke, if there ever was one. Poking, puking, and purging, lobelia, golden seal, and cayenne. These herbs are not kind to the immune system. You will find them highly recommended, frequently recommended by people in the heroic tradition. You will find them suggested for everything from bad breath to cancer, from the flu to whatever you want. And yet, these are herbs that if I use them at all, in limited quantities and limited way. Cayenne and all kinds of hot peppers certainly have some health-giving qualities. However, they are erosive to our ability to taste. They bring tremendous heat into the body, and if we're dealing with a hot cold, we certainly don't want to bring heat deeper into the body. If the body is usually in a state that is inflamed, cayenne is an inflammatory herb, and so it triggers more inflammation and greater histamine response. If you don't believe me, stick your finger in some cayenne powder and put it in your mouth and tell me what happens. Do your eyes water? That's a histamine response. Does your face grow red? That's a histamine response. Does your mouth burn? That's a histamine response. Do you salivate? That's a histamine response. Does your mouth swell up? That's a histamine response. And when we consume that histamine response is not just localized to what I can describe to you right here, but goes throughout your entire body. And so, no, I don't use cayenne when I'm dealing with colds or flu. Again, I understand that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there recommending it. Dr. Christopher, one of the better-known herbalists of the early part of the 20th century, was a great fan of cayenne. As a matter of fact, he suggested that everybody start their day with a heaping spoon of cayenne stirred into a glass of water and drunk down. And occasionally there would be a vinegar in with it as well. Oh, my goodness, I would probably have to go back to bed if I tried to do that to myself first thing in the morning. So let's let the cayenne be. Let's let the hot peppers be, especially when we want our immune system to be as healthy as possible. I find that when we are well nourished, that we don't need to have that much pepper in our food in order for our food to taste good. Golden seal is another one of the big three of the heroic tradition. And golden seal is an herb that was hugely popular, so popular that it was virtually harvested to extinction. And the United Plant Savers of America, which is an organization, urges us, if we are going to use golden seal at all, to only buy cultivated golden seal and not to use any of it that is found in the wild, or to grow your own golden seal. It is a fairly easy to grow plant of the deep forests of the northeast part of the United States. Golden seal has a bright yellow root, and that yellow root contains a very important healing compound called berberine. I mentioned golden seal as well as its cohorts that also contain berberine, including barberry and Oregon grapefruit and cactus in down their sexual and reproductive health, the wise woman way. So I'm not saying that golden seal is a useless plant. It is obviously a very, very useful plant. What I'm saying is don't take it if you have a cold or the flu, or if you don't want to get them. I mentioned this a couple of shows ago when I was talking about buying echinacea tincture, and that you have to be quite careful when you're buying echinacea tincture, because frequently golden seal has been added to it. And this is kind of the heroic tradition glomming on to what I think of as the wise woman tradition. I was very disenchanted with golden seal. It was, being one of the big stars of the heroic tradition, one of the very first herbs that didn't grow around me that I learned about, and people were just raving about, oh, Golden Seal does this, and Golden Seal does that, and somebody served me a cup of Golden Seal tea, and I took one sip of that and nearly spit it on the floor. What nasty, bitter, horrible stuff it was. And then they said, well, yes, that's why we powder it and put it in capsules, because it's just too bitter to take. And immediately a flag came up in my mind, and I said, well, wait a second. If something is too bitter to take, we don't want to bypass the guardian of our taste and say, I'm overriding you. This is too bitter. And you say I should spit it out, but I'm just going to put it down my gullet anyhow. So it is, in fact, true that there are lots of alkaloids in Golden Seal, and that these alkaloids are very harsh on the liver. And not only that, Golden Seal really makes the kidneys work super hard. There are so many other anti-infective herbs like echinacea, yarrow, sage, garlic, that you really don't need to use Golden Seal. What does it have going for it? A great reputation. What does it have going against it? It's been harvested almost to extinction. I think it's a good time to let go of Golden Seal and to let go of any remedies that contain Golden Seal as well. So, do watch out for it. Also, early on, I mentioned to you that we would talk more about essential oils and why it is that I avoid essential oils. We can take any plant and extract from it one constituent or one group of constituents, say the volatile oils or the glycosides or the alkaloids. And once we have extracted that, we can then purify that so that that's just what we have and not any contaminants. And then we can concentrate that. And those three steps, extraction, purification, and concentration, are the steps that we use any time we want to make a drug from an herb. Now, many drugs nowadays are not made from herbs, but there are still some drugs that are made from herbs or were first made from herbs, and those are the processes we use. Those exact processes are how we create an essential oil. We extract the oils from plants, we purify them, and then we concentrate. And what this means is that the essential oil then is a drug, just as any other extracted, purified, concentrated constituent from a plant would be a drug. So, as I said before, I don't consider essential oils safe or natural. In fact, essential oils can be quite lethal. Children have died from mouthing a closed bottle of essential oil. I said that Golden Seal was possibly hard on the liver and the kidneys, but essential oils are definitely harsh on the liver and very difficult for the kidneys to deal with. And yes, there are quite a few cold and flu remedy products containing essential oils, all the way from cough drops, and some of them very famous, like Ricola cough drops, which can have herbs all over the package, and you think, oh, this is great. This is a cough drop made from herbs, but it's not. It's basically sugar with essential oils. Okay, essential oils taken from those plants, but it is still essential oils. It used to be that your kind of ordinary, run-of-the-mill drugstore cough drop was similarly just some sugar with some artificial flavor and some artificial color and sometimes something else thrown in there. But nowadays, your regular cough drop that you just pick up from an aisle in the drugstore is very likely to have essential oils in it. They seem to be everywhere. So I've told you that I consider them drugs, and that's one of the reasons that I don't use them. But I have a more important reason, and that is that there is some preliminary evidence that consistent and frequent use of essential oils can actually impair the immune system. And so I think to myself, well, now, wait a second. Here I am. I'm doing my best to stay healthy, to not get colds and flus, to eat the foods that help counter colds and flus. I have my jar of sage honey right here. I have my jar of sauerkraut. I had my elderberry jam or my elderberry syrup. All right? I have a big mound of garlic. I've made some herbal tinctures. I have some evergreens growing outside my door. I've got some mullein dried. I am all set and ready to take on whatever winter may throw at me. But I don't need to include essential oils as part of what I'm doing. I'm also very deeply concerned about the hormonal disruption effect of the essential oil. I personally have several students whose little boys have actually grown breasts from using hair care products containing essential oils. I have seen numerous massage therapists who are literally up to their elbows in essential oils a large part of the day, with immune systems that are in great need of help. So for the sake of our immune system, when we're dealing with a cold or flu or trying to prevent colds or flus, little or no essential oils. And if you're thinking, well, I'm just, I diffuse it into the air. Oh, but remember that what we breathe in goes into the bloodstream and then to the lungs. So when we use essential oils in that way, when we diffuse them into the air, unfortunately, their ability to disrupt healthy immune system functioning and to disturb the endocrine system, which means the hormonal system in the bodies, is magnified. Right? In the same way that you would not get anywhere near as sick from rolling around in asbestos as you do from breathing in asbestos. When something is in the air and we breathe it in, it goes from the lungs directly into the blood system. So take a look at your use of essential oils. They become very popular. And ask yourself if it is really improving your overall health or not. I am also concerned about the large amount of plant material that is used to make essential oils. I ask and ask and ask about how much actual lavender was in a 1 ounce bottle of lavender oil. And many people that I would have thought knew didn't know, and the people who did seem to know gave me quite a few varying answers. So I guess that it is a varying answer, that it's not, we always get this amount of yield, but that it depends on the weather and the fertilizer and so on and so forth. But I do believe that the low figure that was given me was 1,000 pounds of lavender in a 1 ounce bottle of essential oil of lavender. That's an awful lot of plants. It's an awful lot of plants for the earth to sustain, for it to wind up being in one little bottle in the possession of one person. Now, I love lavender, and that's why I grow lavender. Lavender makes a nice house plant to grow all kinds of aromatic plants. They are just wonderful. Ooh, and it's great favorite of mine. And of course, you can make honey of any and all of them, just as we discussed last week in making that sage honey. So we have pretty much come to the end of our mini sessions together here, looking at colds and flus, the wise woman way. We have learned that colds and flus are viruses, and things that are antibacterial are not necessarily going to improve our odds, but that a great number of food and food-like things can help to prevent colds and flus, notably sauerkraut, but also yogurt, elder, garlic, honey, all really nice things that we can use. We've also learned that when the body is busy dealing with a viral infection like a cold or a flu, that it's easier for a bacterial infection to sneak in. And so we've looked at those antibacterial herbs like echinacea, yarrow, and evergreens, and some of the mint family plants like sage that can be so effective in helping us counter some of the deeper infections. Because we're doing this in an oral way, it's not really profitable for me to give you footnotes or specific scientific references. But if you do want those things, please refer to my books. Because although I don't have a book about colds and flus, you'll find all of the herbs that we've been talking about in one or the other of my books. As a matter of fact, down there, my latest book, down there, Sexual and Reproductive Health, The Wise Woman Way, has almost 50 pages of footnotes. I talk about echinacea. I talked about yarrow, quite a few of the herbs that we've talked about in the past couple of months. You will find in that book, and in much greater length and in much greater detail. I'm not sure if I told you way back at the beginning that one of the best ways to stay healthy in the wintertime is to get a little cold. But if I did, I'm going to remind you, and if I didn't, then I will have said, get a little cold. Let yourself experience the cold. Now, spring equinox here upon us, really, let yourself out. Take yourself out. It's been a long winter. Spring is at its midpoint. Things are starting to bust out, and there are indeed green blessings everywhere. When you're inside, come and visit me at SusanWeed.com, and those books, CDs, videos, classes, correspondence courses, we got it for you at the WiseWomanBookshop.com. Green blessings. Thank you, Gemini, for giving me this opportunity once again to share with you and all of the listeners.
Thank you, Susan. This concludes Part 8 of our 8-part series, Colds and Flus, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.